Welcome to the RFP Success Show with host Lisa Rehurek, the #1 sought-after authority on RFP success. Each week, we bring you information, strategies, or resources to help you win more business through RFPs and have a little fun doing it. Let's get this week's episode started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RFP Success Show. I am your host, Lisa Rehurek, founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company and industry authority on RFP success. Today, we're talking about getting started. So this is for all of you beginners out there. I have been getting a lot of requests lately from people that are just starting out with the RFP world. It's brand new to them. They don't know where to find RFPs. They don't know what to do when they get an RFP. And we don't necessarily generally work with people that are in that early phase, not for any particular reason other than they generally don't have budgets to hire outsourced help. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to put together this podcast to kind of start giving some guidance to those of you who are new and really trying to figure out what to do when you get an RFP in-house. So we're going to split this into two kind of areas. One is, how do you find RFPs? Where do you go to find them? And then the second half, I'll talk about what you do when you get one of those things and you want to respond. What does that look like? So let's start out with finding opportunities. One more caveat before I dig into that is that I'm going to talk all about corporate opportunities, state and local. I am not going to talk federal opportunities because federal opportunities, it's a completely different beast. It is not in our wheelhouse. We don't deal with federal. But if you go back and look at our podcast library, you're going to find at least one, if not two, podcast episodes specific to federal, because I bring experts in for that to talk about how to go after federal business, what you should be looking for, all of that kind of stuff. Federal is its own unique beast, and I always bring in experts for that, people that know that space, that have been working in the federal space for a really long time, and that is not me. So that's where we're at. So let's talk about finding opportunities. And we're going to start with corporate. Yes, corporate entities release RFPs all the time. There are a whole lot of big companies out there that use RFPs because they're also looking to find the best solution. They're not just picking somebody off a shelf or Googling. They want bids, and they put the specs out there in the form of RFP, RFQ, RFI all the time. The challenge with corporates is that there's not really any one place you can go to get notifications about corporates. You are going to have to know who your targets are. Now, you should know that anyway. If you've ever listened to any of my podcasts, you know that I tout this all the time, and you'll hear me say it several times in this podcast recording, but you've got to know who your targets are. This is not just about sitting in a room and throwing darts at a big blank wall. You can't do that. It's not going to work, because what's going to happen is you're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to get RFPs in that you shouldn't be bidding on. You're going to waste time and resources on those. So you've got to know who your targets are. This is Business Development 101. So if you don't know that yet, you got to back up and go back to that space where you figure out who are your ideal clients. Who should you be targeting? What are the criteria for those target audiences? Okay. For corporate, what I would say is, 10 to 20 top targets for maybe the next 12 to 18 months is what should be on your list, depending on how big. It may be more if you're a bigger company, whatever that looks like. But again, I think we're talking to most small businesses here are going to be listening to this particular podcast. And then you're just going to have to do the legwork. This is about, feet on the ground and finding out if these companies release RFPs and how you can get on their list. So the best way to do that, the single best way to do that is to start building relationships in that company. So let's say that Disney, talk about a behemoth beast of corporate to start off with, probably not one of the best examples just because they're so big, but they, I know, release RFPs all the time, and they have a lot of purchasing power, right? So you would start finding out where the Disney folks that you want to be talking to in whatever department you are targeting, where they hang out, what types of networking events do they go to, what type of conferences, association meetings, anything like that. Sometimes you just got to pick up the phone and start calling them and just say, hey, you know what? I'm a vendor. This is what I do. I know you've got a lot of us, but I want to start building a relationship with you all. Can I get on a vendor list? How does that work? You can also call the procurement departments or the supplier folks, the purchasers in those large corporations and ask them, how do you release RFPs? How can I find out about those? Can I get on a list? So again, this is just doing the legwork. Best way is to start building those relationships. Second best way is just picking up the phone and calling the procurement department, figuring out if they've got a list that you can get on. And then you can start watching what types of things are coming out and start building those relationships, because when you bid cold on an RFP, you've got less than a 5% chance of winning. Bidding cold is a bad thing. So you want to be bidding on entities that know you, at least to some degree, all right? The other piece of the puzzle on corporates is if you are a diverse supplier in any way, shape, or form, then there are so many more avenues for you. If you're a minority-owned business, a woman-owned business, LGBTQ, a veteran, and I'm sorry, I think I'm missing one or two in there, but all of those, there's ecosystems around those small, diverse business worlds, and a lot of corporations have supplier diversity departments that are there to help make sure that the organization is meeting their diverse goals. And they want to hear from you. Those supplier diversity folks actually want to hear from you. So that's a whole other avenue. If you want to learn more about that, go back, and I apologize, I don't have the podcast number, but I do have a podcast with the amazing Heather Cox, who is a diversity guru, and she talks all about kind of the diverse supplier world, and you should go back and listen to that podcast. All right. So that's really the corporate side of things. For state and local government, it's not that much different. It's still, you should be building relationships. You should know who your targets are. Build relationships with those targets. Same number, 10 to 20, depending on how big you are. Start finding out where they're hanging out. Do whatever you can to build relationships. The great thing about the government, though, is that there's a lot more information you can get. So a lot of, especially local cities and things like that, they hold reverse procurement events, and look those up in your area and find out when they're having them, and you get to go and you get to meet the procurement people and you can learn about their process. It's a fantastic way to just get in front of these procurement people and start asking questions, and go in not necessarily expecting to peddle your wares on them. Sure, you want to introduce yourself, but your intent should be to go in and ask them a ton of questions and really learn about their process. And as you can imagine, you can't do that for 50 entities if you're one person. That's why I say you've really got to know who your target is, because there's only so much time in the day to do these kinds of things. You've got to be very targeted, all right? The other beautiful thing about government stuff is that there are services out there. So the two services that I use that I like, one is called BidSync, BIDSYNC, and they're a little pricey. So depending on what your budget is, they give some pretty good information, and I track using BidSync, but I also use a company called FindRFP.com. It's just FindRFP.com. I think it's like $30 a month, pretty inexpensive. You can put in keywords for both of these organizations. You can put in keywords, and then they'll start sending you bids based on those keywords. And I think like BidSync, you can filter it down even more by area, by region, things like that. So those are really good, and you should get on those lists anyway. You should have one of those just to, see what's coming in. If you are, let me just give you an example of something. Let's say that you do background screening and you do it only in the city of Minneapolis. So you go out and you find one of these services and you plug in your keywords and you want to filter it down to Minneapolis. What I would do for your beginners is not filter it down to just Minneapolis. Not saying that you're going to bid on everything else nationally that you see come across, but what it does is it starts getting you familiar with the types of things that different agencies and organizations are looking for. And that's just additional intelligence that you should have, right? So that is a suggestion that I would make. That's one thing. The other thing about the government side is that every agency's got a way to sign up. I mean, I don't even know if there is an agency anymore that doesn't have a way for you to sign up directly with them to get their RFP requests. And yes, I recommend you doing both of these. The reason being is that Find RFP and BidSync, they're always a little bit behind, 3, sometimes maybe 2 days, sometimes a week. And that time, oh my gosh, that time is so valuable, right? When we're on a deadline. So you want to get it as soon as possible. So the best way is to go directly to that agency, sign up. You can do that via their website generally, but again, this takes time, feet on the ground, researching. This is great work, by the way, for an intern. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have time, I don't have money to hire anybody to do this, great stuff for an intern to do. Give them your top 10 or 20 prospects, have them go out and start researching all this kind of stuff. So get on the agency or organization's list. Still, for government, I would suggest that you still get at least findrfp.com, because then you can just see what's coming out from other entities, not just the ones that you're highly targeting, and you kind of get the best of both worlds there. So that is all about how do you find opportunities. Now I want to shift more into what do you do when you get an opportunity? You've got an RFP in-house. Holy cow, what do we do? And this is kind of funny because it feels so natural to me. I've been doing this for 20 plus years that sometimes I feel like I'm going to give you guys some really basic steps. And some of this maybe is going to be common sense for you, but I want to make sure that I break it down and don't assume anything because I'm so used to doing this. It goes back to that expertise, right? When we're the experts, sometimes we can't see back to when we got started. And it was the same thing for me 20 some years ago when I got the first RFP in hand. What the heck is this thing? And it was not a small opportunity. These were huge, big opportunities that I would work on. So let's talk about that. The first thing you need to do is you need to read the RFP. Now, that sounds really obvious, but I will tell you how many times I have a client that calls us and they have not even read the RFP. You got to read the RFP from front to back. You got to read it and highlight things and put questions on things. And the first pass, what you're really looking for is, can you do this? Are you going to be able to meet all of the requirements that they're asking for? And you need to make sure that you do that up front. The second piece of the puzzle is that most RFPs have a Q&A period. So you can ask questions, but it's generally, I'd say 90 to 95% of the time, a very tight time frame. For the next week, you can ask questions and then that time is cut off. So you want to also be reading that for any questions that you might have that you need to pose back to the organization that has released the RFP. All right. So read through the RFP, make note of any questions, and then make sure that you can respond. If you decide, okay, yes, we're going to respond to this, then the next thing that you really need to do is create your response template. And I have had people fight me on this because they'll say, we've got plenty of time to create the response template. We got to get the assignments out. We've got to get this out. We've got to do this other piece here. But what the response template allows you to do is it allows you to put into the format that they are requesting and making sure that you know who is going to be addressing all of the questions. So in every RFP, there will generally be a section that says RFP response requirements or RFP response format, whatever that looks like. And in a perfect world, which we don't live in, but in a perfect world, you'll be able to kind of just copy that nice little outline that they've provided for how they want you to respond, and you drop that into a Word document. You want to reformat it, make it look good, put headers, put your logo on, all of that kind of stuff. Doesn't have to be overly fancy, especially if it's a government proposal. But that way okay, here are all of the questions that they've asked, and then your template is set up. Because when your template is set up, then you can just go in and drop your answers into each of the questions. Now, I will say that because I said in a perfect world, they've got this all nicely laid out. That is not always the case. As a matter of fact, very seldom is that the case. And you're going to find that there are 2 or 3 or 5 different areas of the RFP that have competing criteria for how to respond, conflicting criteria for how to respond, all sorts of things like that. So number one, this also allows you to decide how you want to lay out the format. And if you have any questions, because so many times you will, then you could submit those questions in the Q&A period. And then again, it also sets it up so that you and your writers are ready to go. You've got this template. And what I suggest doing is going through that template then and making writing assignments for every single one of those questions that they want you to address. So we go through and we'll put, Lisa's responsible for this one. Maybe Jennifer is responsible for this next one. Maybe Komal is responsible for this next one. So that's what we do, and the team that is responding should be part of that conversation. If it's just you responding, then it's all going to be you. I'm sorry for you for that. And then this is something that we support you in as well. Now, if you've got budget and you want support in this, contact me because we absolutely will help. I know if you're a small business, sometimes that's hard to do. We generally can meet you where you are with your budget. We can do at least some pieces of the puzzle for you to help support you. But okay, so you're going to read through the requirements. You're going to set up a response template based on the response requirements. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to create a calendar. Now, I just go into Word and go to a new template, create a calendar, use a month calendar. And the first thing that we do is we put in the due date. And then we reverse engineer from there. So if your due date is June 14th and it's an electronic submittal, then great. Then your editorial peer review and those kinds of things can be done on the 13th. And you can be still assembling maybe on the 10th. But if your due date is June 14th, you've got to ship it to someplace across the nation, and you've got to produce 5 copies of it. You've got to put all of that time in. It's got to at least be shipped the day before. Frankly, I would ship it 2 days before because I don't know about you, but I have had plenty of packages not get there, and this has happened in the RFP world. If you're relying on FedEx or UPS, you better get it there a day in advance. So 2 days ahead, you're going to put in that calendar that's the shipping date, which means that production maybe has to happen the day before or maybe that morning, depending on how many copies and how big the response is. And then you've got to think about things like peer review and formatting and all of that. You've got to build all of that in. And then you can start thinking about when the writing has to be done. When you reverse engineer that way, so much better than just saying, okay, here's the day that we've got it and we're going to go forward from here. Nope, reverse engineering is the way to go. The other thing you want to make sure you put in that calendar is when questions are due, when questions are going to be released. And everybody on the team should have a copy of that calendar, and everybody should agree to the deadlines verbally. And that calendar really becomes kind of your project plan for making sure that things get done. All right. So you're going to create a calendar. And then you also want to think through your strategy. So when I say strategy, what is the solution that you're providing to what they're asking for, and how are you going to differentiate yourself? So this is not ever just about giving them just what they ask for and sending it off. It's about crafting your answers so that you can showcase you are the best option for them to choose. And that strategy conversation needs to happen up front. My recommendation is always that you should have a theme for that particular RFP response, that theme being something that they will walk away and really remember, that is relevant to the solution that you're providing, that differentiates you. So that strategy conversation needs to talk about that. What is our theme? What do we really want them to know? Okay. So when you do all of that, then you're going to start writing and get that writing done. Do not wait till the last minute. It feels like, oh my gosh, this isn't due for 3 weeks. I got plenty of time. And I'm going to tell you that will bite you in the ass every single time. That's why that calendar is so important. So get your writing done. then you should always think about different people that can review this. Well, let me back up. Once the writing comes in, if you've got multiple people writing, you've got to account for the fact that you're going to have different voices. People are going to respond in different ways. And so you need to build in time to kind of make cohesive and take that writing and turn it into something that's much more of again, kind of a marketing document. Yes, spec'd out, but a document that's going to sell that you are the best solution for this. So there's got to be somebody in there that's going to do that. Then once that's all done, you've got to have some peer reviewers. You should always have at least one objective person that has not been part of the writing team to be able to review it. It's one of our most popular services, one of my personal favorite services, because we can come in and look at it from a completely different perspective, and we're not so close to it that we can't see what we can't see. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Les Brown is, "You can't see the picture when you're inside the frame." So it's really good, whether you can afford to call somebody like us, or if you've got somebody else on your team, whatever that looks like, find somebody who can objectively review that and make sure that you're showcasing yourself in the best light possible. Then you should have somebody editorial peer review it. So the editorial person generally is somebody who can do the formatting. They'll double check that all the requirements have been met, and then they will also check for editorial things, making sure that sentence structure works, grammar's good, doing the good old spell check, all of that kind of stuff. All right. So let me just recap those things. You want to read through the requirement, read through the entire RFP. You're going to set up the response template based on those response requirements. You're going to create your response calendar. You're going to have a strategy discussion, whether that's you alone or you with a team. You're going to think through the strategy and come up with a theme. You're going to write the response. You're going to take all of the writing and kind of do a second pass at the writing to make sure that it's all cohesive and that your theme is showcased and that you are showcasing your firm in the best light possible. You're going to have an objective peer reviewer, kind of from a strategic perspective, and then you're going to have an editorial peer reviewer, and then you're going to produce that sucker and you're going to get it out the door. So that's oversimplifying all of the steps of the process, but that's really for those of you who are just getting started and need to know how to, okay, I've got this thing, it's really big. If you can't afford to get help, if you can afford to get help, I mean, honestly, obviously, that is always my vote because that's what we do. But you got to get help. It's really hard to do these by yourself, whether it's another person internally or a team of people internally. You got to pull together a team to help you with this. But follow those steps. Try not to stress out. They can be really, really stressful, but if you follow those steps and really map out your calendar and work to the calendar, it's going to help you with that stress because everything flows and it all kind of compounds in the end. So get stuff done as much as you can up front, and good luck. Now, the other thing I would say for those of you who are beginners, the RFP Success book is a fantastic book to give you some ideas. It doesn't walk you through the process, but it's going to give you a lot of ideas around, you know, how to make sure that you're showcasing yourself again in the best light possible, and some of the do's and don'ts of things that you shouldn't be doing and should be doing. That's going to help you a lot. And then, you know, don't get discouraged if you lose the first one. Sometimes you just got to kind of get that investment in trying, seeing what happens, and you learn from your mistakes. In government proposals, you can almost always get information on the back end. You always want to make sure you get copies of your competitors' proposals. Sometimes they won't give those to you until after the contract is signed, but almost always you can get those. It's part of the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And try to get the scoring sheets as well. That information a lot of times is readily available in the government space. In the corporate space, just ask for a debrief conversation. 15 minutes. Ask them, I just want 15 minutes of your time. And then you just want to get feedback. What did you like about our proposal? What did you think was missing? What are the key reasons why you did not choose us? Those kinds of things are very important for the learning experience. And know that this is a long-term play. Playing in the RFP space is not like a one and done. I have people that'll come to me and say, hey, I heard that I could just go out and bid on a piece of government work and it'll be millions of dollars. And when I win, then that's all I have to do. Yeah, it doesn't really work that way, you guys. I mean, do people get lucky? Sure. But this is a long-term play. This is a long-term culture. You've got to build a culture of it in your organization. And it's going to take you a while to get your rhythm and to get your processes and all of that set up. So know that. Another really great way to get acclimated to RFPs is to subcontract with a bigger company that is missing a piece of the puzzle that you might have. So that's another consideration that you can think about. All right. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. You can go out to our LinkedIn page. We've got a LinkedIn community called the RFP Success Community. Come out there and ask questions. That's probably the best place to go. And, we're always here to support you and would love to hear about your successes. So thanks for listening today. You all have been listening to the RFP Success Show. I'm Lisa Rehurek, your host, signing off until next week.
You have been listening to the RFP Success Show with RFP expert Lisa Rehurek, author of the RFP Success book. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, make sure you click the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. And thanks for spending time with us today.